So over the last few months I've been doing quite a lot of live music production streams over on Twitch, and one of the questions that seems to keep popping up in the chat over and over again is, why are all my faders set to 0? Now the TLDR reason is that proper gain staging while you're producing a track gives you much finer control over the little details when you're mixing a track down. So here are 5 reasons how and why that is, so let's just get into it. Now reason number 1 is that fader low is logarithmic. So what that means is small incremental changes towards the top of the fader will affect the signal by percentages of a dB, whereas incremental changes towards the bottom of a fader will affect the signal by multiple dBs.
Right, so let's have a look at what that means in practice and what we can do about it. So let me just solo my bass channels. You can see that right in the fader, when it's around 0, leads to very small changes to the overall level. And if we compare that to when we ride the fader when it's towards the bottom, you can hear that we make massive changes to the overall level. So at this early stage of production, when I want the bass to sit right with the drums, instead of using the fader, what I use is the pre-gain. And the reason for that is the pre-gain is a linear volume control as opposed to a logarithmic one like the fader. And once I have a rough balance for my bass, as I begin to bring other instruments into the production, I can then use the fader to make more precise incremental adjustments later on down the mix.
Now reason number 2 is MIDI controller efficiency. So of course, the more efficient you are with your MIDI controllers, the faster you can work.
So as you can see here, I have 2 MIDI controllers with faders. And as awesome as both of these controllers are, you can see that each of them has only got 8 faders. And that means once you've added more than 8 channels into your track, it can be very difficult knowing which fader is controlling which channel. So what I've done to speed up my workflow is set up the quick controls so that the pre-gain and the channel strip is always set to the first slot. So what that means is I always have access to the pre-gain on whatever channel I've got selected.
Now reason number 3 is for gain staging. Going both in and out of plugins.
So let's take this crash sample for example. If I solo it and press play, we can see that the level is already peaking at plus 0.2, and anything that is peaking above 0 is going to cause digital distortion. Now, just this crash in isolation might not necessarily be so much of a problem, but say we have 50 channels in our track and they're all peaking at above 0. That means we have 50 possible distortion points, and if we were to have a few of those play at exactly the same time, the mix is just going to sound horrible. And furthermore, if we just concentrate on this crash, and let's say I wanted to add a delay. Clipping on the way into the delay would mean that digital distortion is being repeated every time the delay repeats. Now turning down the fader on the channel would mean we're no longer clipping the output on that channel. But having this plugin as an insert means that the signal is hitting the plugin before it hits the fader. Therefore, the signal is clipping on its way into the plugin and out of the plugin before it actually gets to the channel fader. So again, the solution is to go to the channel pre-gain and turn it down before it actually hits the insert plugins. So an important point to make here is if you're using dynamic plugins like a compressor, It's always a good idea to hit that compressor with enough gain for the compressor to actually do its thing. So I might have had this crash sitting good in the mix with the pre-gain down at -30, but depending on the source material, it might be difficult for the compressor to work with such a low signal being passed into it. So what I would do in this instance is push the pre-gain up to a reasonable volume and then use the output set to my quick controls to balance the level of the channel. And I would apply the same rules and logic for when I'm using an EQ plugin or a distortion or anything that changes the dynamics or the volume.
Now, reason number 4 is that we have a different perception of sound when we're listening to it at a higher volume compared to when we're listening to it at a lower volume. And this is especially true when we're working with reverb sends and delay sends, which is why I have these set to VCA faders.
So right here I've got the very beginnings of a very simple track. It's something that I put together during the early hours of last night. So if I have a listen back now during the daytime, I can hear that I was being very heavy-handed with the reverb on the snare and the tom. And I've also got a little bit of delay on the higher bass notes that again I overcooked. And the reason for that is because I was making the track at night. I had my monitors down very low so as not to disturb anybody. And I've obviously overcompensated when it comes to my send channels. So what I'm going to do is select them all by holding down Control. Clicking on them, and then I'm going to right click and add a VCA fader to the selected channels. Now, just to keep everything organized, what I'm going to do is grab the VCA channel from my arrange page and pull it down into my buses folder. I know it's not exactly a bus, but I just want it down here to help with my quick mixing, which I will show you in a second. So let me just label that. Then I'm going to hit visibility, zones, and I'm going to push the VCA over onto the right side of my console. And what this means is I now have a single fader which will allow me to control all of my returns in one go. So of course now I'm starting to move the faders away from their 0 position, but the point is I'm now getting into the mixing stage, and if I had been playing about with these return faders while I was doing the production, trying to dial them all back at this point by such a fine amount would just be a very frustrating process.
And reason number 5 is for quick bus mixing. Also known as the top-down approach.
So as you can see in my console, I've got a whole lot of buses set up: drum bus, bass bus, harmony bus, melody bus, vocal bus, and now my VCA. And as I showed you in the visibility panel, I've shifted them all over to the right hand side of the console. And now that I've done all my gain staging with the pre-gain and through the plugins, now is the time I can actually utilize the faders and start to make fine adjustments. And the reason I pushed all of my buses over to the right hand side is so they will all appear consecutively in my MIDI controller. So now I can do some very quick and very precise top-down mixing.
Okay, if you've made it this far through the video, thanks for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe if you found any of this helpful. You can find me over on Twitch here. I'll also put a link in the description below. But anyway, that's it for now. I've been Craig Lopez. This has been Tutorialism. Now go make some music. Peace.